This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, good morning to the Friday morning break show with me, Carl Smith, where we ask the question, jog on. Should we have more PE teaching in our schools? I'll introduce our guest, Gemma Bentley, who is something of an expert in these matters, and we'll find out what she thinks about this important question.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So, imagine there was a pill that you could give every child. The pill would make them happier, healthier, and more intelligent. It had no side effects, and it was not only safe in the long term, but significantly improved your chances of having a long and happy life. Imagine no more, because that pill exists. It's called exercise, and it's free. In school, we call it physical education, or PE for short, and it is a compulsory subject in schools, every school. Everyone thinks exercise is a good thing, so surely we should make sure that young people get plenty of it. Right? Wrong. It seems that increasingly in our schools, exercise is a secondary consideration, and PE has actually been in decline in recent years. According to the Youth Sport Trust, since the London 2012 Olympics, the reported time spent in PE at Key Stage 3 has dropped by an astounding 20%. And for Key Stage 4 by an even more astounding 38%. This time we can't blame computers, the internet, or social media. Governments and schools decide what is in the curriculum, not algorithms or AI. And they have decided, consciously or subconsciously, that it just isn't as important as other things. Meanwhile, we face a child obesity crisis with 1 in 7 children under the age of 15 now classified as obese. And we also face a child mental health crisis with nearly 1 million children being referred to CAMHS in 2022-23 alone. So, should we have more physical education in our schools? Or should we just jog on? Joining me today is someone who has spent 20 years as a PE teacher and school leader, and therefore, perhaps, is rather better qualified than most of us to offer a perspective on what is happening and why. Gemma Bentley, welcome to the show. Gemma, have you been doing any jogging lately?
Well, good morning, Carl. Actually, I play more tennis than jogging, but that's my sport. So,
to be fair, that's a reasonable answer. So you're a very keen tennis player.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And netballer, and as much as I can do, I go out for some jogging and walking and things like that as well.
Yeah. Sounds good. Why did you become a PE teacher then, Gemma?
Well, sport has always been a massive passion of mine. I've always led a very active lifestyle. When I was, very young, I started swimming and dancing and playing netball. My parents were a massive influence and supporter of me taking part in physical activity. They would be taxiing me around left, right and centre all the way through my childhood to the swimming pool. I remember at one point I was training for about 16 hours a week in the swimming pool. So
16 hours a week?
Yes, that was my main sport when I was younger. Absolutely loved it. And I was having to be at the pool for 5:30 in the morning. So my parents were having to drive us there in the morning. So it took not just a massive commitment on my part, but a huge commitment on their part as well, to get me to and from. So they were a big influence on me.
How do you even get 16 hours a week into your week? How does that work? What was it, like 5 o'clock till 7 or
Yeah,
every
so
day? And
when you're training at quite a high level, you train more than once a day. So a lot of high level athletes will be training in the morning, and then they'll go to their day at work or to school, and then of course they'll train again in the evening. So quite often I'd train from sort of 5:30 to 7:30 and then go to school, and then I'd have training in the evening as well for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and on the weekend as well. So yeah, that's how the 16 hours were there. And of course on top of that I was going to dance lessons, so I did ballet, tap, modern as well. And I was playing netball and things for the school at the same time. So I was just very, very active when I was a youngster.
you're not kidding. Did you actually ever sleep when you were a child?
Yes, I did. I slept very well, actually, because we all know that, if you wear yourself out enough and you do take part in physical activity, it can help you sleep.
Now, that's a really good point, because, of course, we know a lot of young people do struggle with their sleep habits, never
Yeah,
mind
sure.
a lot of adults. And you had a childhood that was absolutely rammed packed with activity and physical exercise, very demanding physical exercise, from early in the day right the way through. And you did well academically, so this clearly did not affect your academic studies.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, it was probably, it gives you more motivation. I think when you do sport, you do have to show a lot of drive and motivation. And of course, because I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a PE teacher, obviously I needed to be good at sport, but I also needed to get my GCSEs and my A levels and things like that so I could go off to uni and become that. So, it was a driving force as well.
So you knew from quite a young age that you wanted to be a PE teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
It was either that or a paramedic.
Okay.
But I saw too many bad things on TV about paramedics, so it put me off a little bit. So yeah, PE was always my thing.
We deal with some crises in education, but not generally, 4 or 5 a day, hopefully. But having said all of that, and then you never wavered. This was always the plan.
All the way through.
And then you became a PE teacher. So what's it been like?
Oh, it's been amazing. Being a PE teacher is the fun part of teaching, I think I'd probably say. Within schools, you are going to be the main influence. And that was one of the reasons why I went into PE teaching, because I wanted to influence other young people to enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid. I wanted people to want to play sports and want to be active. And that's exactly what I've tried to do over the last 20 years. And I feel like I've, had, quite a lot of success around that. And I think I've influenced quite a lot of people into participating in all those activities, and helping young people understand about, why it's important to do PE and sport and be active as well, because that's part of our job as well. It's not just the fun side of things. It's about educating them, and actually when they get a bit older and they're adults, that they then continue to do that and they understand why they need to continue to do that. So
it's so inspiring to have a conversation with somebody in teaching who is so enthusiastic, so positive, so clear that they made the right career choice, and not somebody that's just starting out and is a bit sort of green-eyed about what green-eyed, they're a bit sort of green as far as knowing what it's like to really be a teacher, but somebody who's done it for a long time. And this is an opportunity for anybody that's listening who might be thinking, PE teaching might be something I'd like to do. What is it that's made it the joy for you that you hoped it would be?
Yeah, so again, I just think it's when you teach, you see the positives and the improvements that people make in sport in particular. When you're teaching students different sports, you see the progress really clearly in front of you. It's visible. So that's always a joy in lessons. And of course, with PE teaching, you do all the after school activities and the clubs and the teams. And again, with all those children coming along to those after school activities, in netball clubs, we get 30 to 40 kids coming along in over 1 or 2 year groups. So it's great on an after school activity to go out there and see that many students wanting to come and take part and enjoy their sport. So yeah, you get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing them progress and enjoy it themselves.
And as a PE teacher, Gemma, you've got the background, you had the qualifications to pursue a career in sport related industries of all sorts. So you could have gone down a different route.
Yeah.
You could have gone down a coaching route, which you still do in effect, because obviously, you could have gone down, the route of sports related industries, the leisure industry and all those sorts of things. Why then schools, working in schools? What was it that said to you working in schools is better than all of those things?
Well, of course, there's always the fact that it's a very stable job. There's always the background. So, of course, yes, there's the PE side of things, but of course, teaching is a great career. You get good holidays and you have a stable career going forward. So there's that job security. But also from a PE teaching perspective, I just like the idea that, when I was young and I was into lots of sports myself, I wanted to kind of be able to teach all those different sports. So you had a bit of variety in your day as well. And because I did lots of different sports myself, I quite like that idea.
Yeah. And as you then progressed your career as a PE teacher, you saw opportunities then to gradually take on other responsibilities.
Sure.
So did you think that being a PE teacher helped you to seize those opportunities? Is that something you think it's good training for then the more, the leadership opportunities that you then took advantage of in school?
Yeah, absolutely. I know a number of people, including myself, that have taken on more, leadership roles after their PE teaching roles, alongside their PE teaching roles. And I do think it lends well to that. I think the leadership roles that you take on are very well linked to that kind of PE aspect of things and the organisation and things like that, and the type of person you have to be to do that. It's very much lends well to that, and the sort of person you are. You have to be quite outgoing to be a PE teacher. Well, any teacher really, but with the PE, you have to be a lot louder because of the environment and the natural environment that you have to teach in. So yes, it very much does.
Yeah, no, that's good. So the other message to people is that being a PE teacher is also an opportunity to progress in working in schools. It's a good platform for that. And what you're saying, and you're living proof of that, is that lots of PE teachers do progress in schools to more senior positions because perhaps their personality type, but also the kind of things they have to do to thrive as a PE teacher are similar in many ways to the kind of things they have to do as a senior leader.
Absolutely.
And then as a senior leader and a PE teacher, how has that experience been? Do you miss the PE teaching? Do you think that actually no, it's nice to do something else? How's it feel?
It's a balancing act because as my job role has sort of developed, I've gone from teaching PE full time to then taking on some additional roles towards the leadership pathway, and then of course I've kind of moved up to that leadership role. So over the last few years I've kind of developed into that role, and I feel that now I miss the PE a little bit more than I used to, because obviously you do a lot less teaching in the leadership role. So yes, you do, but you still have that you can go and enjoy as well. It's very much a balancing act.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. Well, obviously the main topic of today's show is about the fact that the amount of PE teaching, the amount of physical activity that young people do seems to be in decline, despite the fact everybody thinks that it shouldn't be. And why that is the case and what we do about it. So we're going to go on to that. But I think we'll take a short break. We'll just have a word from our sponsors and also catch up on the latest educational news. So, Gemma, hang on there and we'll be back shortly.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC has focused on remarks made by the former England men's football manager during the annual Richard Dimbleby lecture. Sir Gareth Southgate said in the lecture that he fears young men are spending too much time gaming, gambling and watching pornography, and that they need better role models. He said the UK needed to do more to encourage young people, especially young men, to make the right choices in life and to not fear failure. Sir Gareth said he feared that rather than turning to teachers, sports coaches or youth leaders, young men were searching for direction online. There they were finding a new kind of role model, a kind he described as callous, manipulative and toxic. The lecture focused on the importance of belief and resilience for young men, and Sir Gareth cited 3 things that he believes that were needed to build them: identity, connection and culture. He also referenced a report released by the Centre for Social Justice recently, which said boys and young men were in crisis, with a staggering increase in those not in education, employment or training. The full lecture is available on the BBC iPlayer. According to The Telegraph, GCSE exams could be cut back to reduce pupil stress. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has ordered the curriculum and assessment review, and a 45-page interim report has just been published. The Telegraph focused on parts of the report which say some feedback to the panel indicates that exams can place too much stress on students. As part of polling commissioned by the review panel, it found that half of those completing their GCSEs last summer had found it difficult or very difficult to cope with stress during the exam period. The review said before its final report in the autumn, it will consider carefully whether there are opportunities to reduce the overall volume of assessment. The report also added, "We will take a subject-by-subject approach to consider assessment fitness for purpose, consider potential risks and trade-offs with non-exam assessments." It did conclude, however, that traditional examined assessment should remain the primary means of assessment across GCSEs. However, the Shadow Education Secretary, Laura Trott, is reported in the article as saying, "The soft bigotry of low expectations is back." Other Conservative MPs said moves from exams to coursework were a very bad idea. Another said the review must not cave in to the unions. Full details of the report can be found on the Department for Education website, and the full article can be read on the Telegraph website. Other media outlets have also reported on the interim report, including Schools Week, who have a 14 key things you need to know version. The Guardian includes an opinion piece on T-levels. The article by Susanna Rustin describes the qualifications as a disaster, but says ministers won't admit it. The 2-year courses were launched in 2020, but only adopted in England and were created to boost applied learning. There are currently more than 20 T-level options, from early years education to engineering, with students choosing only one. But Rustin writes that fewer than 3% of 16-year-olds enrol for a T-level, with the vast majority sticking with A-levels or other applied qualifications such as BTECs or a combination of both. Last year, about 7,000 students gained a T-level. The dropout rate, however, is higher than for other 16 to 18 courses, with almost a half of those enrolled in 2022 giving up. But data is incomplete as ministers postponed adding data to performance tables in January. Original plans were for T-levels to get up and running and then scrap other vocational qualifications. But in 2021, Protect's Student Choice campaign launched, with a warning that if BTECs were axed, 155,000 teens would be left without any options at all. Labour's Skills Minister has since relaxed the rules around T-levels, compulsory 45-day work placement, and postponed the defunding of the older qualifications. T-levels are now part of the curriculum review led by Professor Becky Francis. Full details can be found on the Guardian website. Finally, the BBC USA and Canada newsfeed has covered the signing of a new presidential executive order to dismantle the US Department of Education. President Trump signed the order, fulfilling a campaign pledge, having accused the department of breathtaking failures and vowing to return the money it controls to individual states. The move is already facing legal challenges from those seeking to block the closure. Most US children attend public schools, which are free and run by local officials. The Federal Education Department administers student loans and runs programs to help low-income students. It does not operate schools or set curriculum, as this is primarily done by states and local districts. Trump has accused the US Department of Education of indoctrinating young people with racial, sexual, and political material. America's largest teachers' union recently criticised Trump's plans, saying he doesn't care about opportunity for all kids. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Okay, welcome back, Gemma. And I was interested in a story that they were talking about there. About sport and schools, but it wasn't about sport and schools. It was about masculinity and the so-called crisis in masculinity, and the fact that it seems there's too much. I think it was Gareth Southgate's speech, wasn't it? And the argument was that boys are spending too much time gaming. There was another thing in the middle of it, and gambling, and then watching pornography. And I'm reminded of in the mid-19th century. I'm a history teacher. I think some of the heads of the famous public schools introduced a lot more PE and sport as a way of combating the tendency of the boys to be rather distracted by less healthy habits, shall we say, without wanting to dwell on what that actually meant, and instead to channel their energies, their natural energies, into sports. And of course, we know that most of the organised sports had their origin in the schools of the mid and late 19th century, at least initially, and a lot of the rules were codified for some of the most popular sports at that time. So literally the sporting world has much of its origins in the world of school sport and activity. So how important is PE teaching to the education of children and young people, Gemma?
Oh, massively. I think, we just playing sport is one thing, but of course we know that PE is not just about playing sport. It has so many other benefits and so many other aims and goals. Everybody knows the health benefits of obviously taking part in physical activity and sport. But of course, there's alongside that, we've got the mental health benefits. We're in a world now where there's sort of a mental health crisis going on. There's lots of young people suffering with mental health illnesses. And we know that sport helps with that. So taking part in physical activity and exercise, they're all very different. You don't just have to play sport. Sport's very structured and has lots of rules, and some children like that and some children don't like that. But then there's obviously exercise where, you can be physically active and sort of aim to try and improve your fitness alongside that. And of course, then there's just physical activity. So people can just be involved in something active that they enjoy. So whether that's down the park with your mates having a kick around, or taking your dog out for a walk or a jog, there's lots of different things, even in school, that we do, and different activities that we do to try and develop those young people sort of alongside their physical health, their mental health, and also their social skills. So, working on the ability to work as a team and to make new friendships and things like that, and be confident and be able to cooperate with each other. We're developing the whole person, not just learning to play a sport. There's so many benefits to it.
One of the things that strikes me is that I remember when I started teaching, there was something of a concern that school sport was in decline, it was claimed, because too many teachers were introducing systems, particularly in primary schools, where there were no winners. There was no competition because, of course, young people couldn't cope with the possibility of failure and that only one person or one team could win. So it was, everybody's a winner. We're not going to have sports days. We're going to have something where everybody wins a prize. Now, of course, most of those stories were largely mythical. They were based on a particular worldview where people were thinking that, it's being taken over by the progressives and the liberal thinkers. And it had very little basis in reality. Now it's blamed on other things. It can be that, but it's usually blamed on other things like social media, like the tendency of young people to want to stay indoors, fear of risk, people feeling that they can't do anything that's remotely, possible, has possible risks to it. What do you think is responsible for the apparent decline of PE in schools over the last, 10, 15 years?
Well, I think there's such a variety of things, I think, that have impacted it. I think there is an element of that resilience with children. I think from a young age, they've got to be taught to be resilient. So yes, we always want people to be taking part, and we want, that participation to be high. But children have also got to learn to fail, and they've got to learn to lose. And part of that is encouraged through PE. There's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. So building that resilience is always important. And there's lots and lots of other things like, within schools, curriculum pressure. So, head teachers have had to make decisions on curriculum, the pressures around results and things like that have taken its toll on the curriculum and how much PE we do in school. So that has seen a decline in those lessons because of that pressure.
So it's progress 8 then?
Lots of things to do with results. So if the schools are feeling that they've got to have the best results and they're compared to other schools that are in results tables, and that is going to have an impact on the amount of time that are given to the other subjects. I'm not just talking about PE, we're talking about things like your expressive arts and your design and things like that. Those sorts of things will be impacted, unfortunately.
Is it a classic case then, Gemma, of valuing things that we can measure rather than measuring things that we value? Because surely most people would agree that we value in society the health, physical and mental, of our young people. We might value it, but it's difficult to measure. You can't produce a grade that's going to say that's how healthy young people are at this particular moment in time. And so because you can't reduce it to a grade or a quantitative measure, therefore we don't measure it, therefore schools aren't accountable for it, therefore they feel under pressure to shift resources to the things that they are accountable for. Do you think there's some truth in that?
Absolutely, I think so, yes. if you're being held to account on your results for other subjects, then of course those are the things that, yes, we value highly. They're going to take a hit, unfortunately, and things get moved around.
So in actual fact, the things that we measure in society, which include the health and well-being of people through their lives, and we've talked about the problems that we have with obesity and mental health at the moment, and we talk about those problems, but when it actually comes to designing the way that schools are set up and the way that they're accountable, we're actually creating incentives for them to move away from the very things that would address those problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's rather a dispiriting conclusion, I think. Who's responsible for that? Is that government? Is it schools? Is it PE teachers? Is it social media and the wider kind of development of the internet and technology? Or is all of that a simplistic scapegoating and it's much more complicated?
Well, I don't like the blame game anyway. I don't like to blame, particular types of people or organisations on anything really. But there's lots of factors, aren't there, around this as to, how it's been impacted. Yes, the curriculum pressures have put a lot of pressure on schools to make decisions around, certain subjects getting more time. PE gets a little bit less time because, like you said, we're not held accountable for that as much. I think teachers, not so much, because if you ask any PE teacher, I would suggest that they would say, give us more PE time. They're very eager to get kids into PE and doing a lot more exercise and physical activity. But yeah, social media, screen time is a massive, massive impact. There's lots and lots of research out there to suggest that young people are spending significant amounts of time online. If they're not gaming, they're on phones, they're on tablets. And unfortunately, that is something that happens at home and that's managed at home.
So PE changing can't change that in itself.
So we can't change that in itself.
I suppose it encourages young people, would you argue, if they feel they're accomplishing in sport and they get the experience of enjoying it, they're more likely to pursue it out of school.
Absolutely, yes. And I mean, let's be honest, children at the age of 4 and 5 are going into school, and that will literally be their very first exposure to sport and PE when they go into school, because unless parents are active and influence them to take part in exercise, which we know some parents do and some people don't. So their first experience and exposure to sport is when they're in primary school, and all the way through school, that will be their primary exposure to PE. So yes, it needs to be positive and it needs to be something they enjoy, and in order to keep them going.
Is it a social mobility issue, Gemma? In that, what I mean by that is that actually the people that are most likely not to engage in sport outside of school are the very people who are most vulnerable and disadvantaged in lots of other ways. And that if we are to address the question of poor social mobility, one of the best places to start is by giving young people opportunities to participate in sport and activity that in their home lives they don't get the opportunity to do.
Absolutely. And that's why, in the majority of schools across the country, you'll know that they will have significant sort of after school activities and, extracurricular activities happening, because they want to provide those opportunities for young people to take part in sport. We all know that the cost of living crisis that's been happening across the country, there's lots of people that just cannot afford to send their children to, football clubs, all kinds of different clubs after school. There's transport, there's getting them there. Access to those things is really difficult for some families, and, there's no criticism there, but that's why schools are trying their hardest to provide those additional opportunities outside the PE curriculum. So people can be involved in as much as they can.
So schools are actually having to plug a gap, or should be plugging a gap, which has increasingly emerged over the last few decades, where young people, particularly the most vulnerable young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, are not getting the physical activity that they might have got. I mean, you can romanticize these things about the past, but they might have got a lot more free active playtime because there wasn't, gaming and the internet in that way. So they were just allowed to roam more freely, I suppose. And because that happens far less, school sport and activity is then more important than it perhaps used to be.
Yeah, it's much more important. I mean, when we were kids, we used to go out after school and we'd be running around and playing and going out on our bikes and doing all those sorts of things. And I don't think that is as common anymore. I think with the gaming and things that they can do online, they're getting stimulated there instead of actually doing that physical activity.
I always find that the concept of risk to me is curious because the natural human tendency is to define risk in terms of an immediate risk. But of course, there are long-term risks with the decisions we make. So by children not playing as actively and being involved as actively in things in society, so the long-term risk is that they become unhealthy and they become depressed and anxious, and then they just live more unhappy and, in fact, frankly, shorter lives. And that's a real and serious risk. But the risk that sometimes parents then weigh that up against is the potential of danger around the corner or mixing with people that they shouldn't do out of the home. And balancing those things is not easy. We appreciate that. But nevertheless, there's a real cost to keeping your child away from activity and sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think there's a balancing act, isn't there, with parents with, think back to when we were younger, you'd be out and about. Is there any more risk now than there was back then? Or is it just that social media, you see all the bad stuff happening? So that obviously scares people a lot. And I can understand that parents will be worried about what their children are up to when they're out and about and who they're with and, the other risks out there. I completely understand that. But I just wonder if the risks were there 20, 30 years ago when we were younger, or is it just that they're a lot more visible now because of social media?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to suggest the risks aren't any greater, or at least only in certain ways and certain places. And on the whole, not at all. And in some cases, the risk is less. The real physical risk is less than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And people have an idealized view of what, I don't know, even life in the 1990s was like, never mind 1970s. The levels of traffic were still heavy in most places. The levels of crime and antisocial behaviour were higher in many places. So the idea that suddenly there is going to be a danger that wasn't there when we were young, well, that actually isn't borne out by reality. So it might be it's something more about the way that we think about the world and we think about risk, rather than necessarily the reality of what that risk, that risk is. The government say that, well, I say the government, I think it probably comes from the medical profession, but they say that children and young people really need about 60 minutes of vigorous exercise, not just strolling around, but vigorous exercise every day. The evidence is that they're not getting anything like that.
No.
And the more vulnerable and the more disadvantaged they are, the less likely they are to be getting that. So what do we do? Is that something schools can put right?
Well, I think, most schools will be doing their statutory kind of 2 hours a week of PE across their year groups. That's not an hour a day.
No.
And of course, schools are providing after school activities on numerous nights of the week, up to 5 o'clock, 5:30, sometimes later if they've got fixtures and things. So I'm not sure how much more schools can do other than keep encouraging and making sure that what they are offering is something that kids want to do and that they enjoy, because there's that element as well, isn't there? That if you're only providing things that children find a lot more difficult or more pressure to be involved in, that's a different matter, isn't it? So it's making sure that your curriculum is enjoyable for...
Yeah, you want as many people to be wanting to participate as you possibly can, because it's very much lighting a fire for their lives generally and their lives in the future.
They do it in school, they're more likely to carry it on outside of school or in their own time. That's one of the key factors, is we're trying to, throughout their time at school, is encourage them to then want to keep doing that. It's not just, they've got to come to school and do PE, but when they finish school and they're into their early adulthood, that they still want to be able to go and do something physically active and stay healthy.
Now, I wasn't like you in that I was nowhere near as good at sport as you were, but I was very enthusiastic, and I in my school life, I remember secondary school, pretty much before school, at break time and lunchtime, I would be playing football. And then I played football outside of school, and played a lot of football. And I also like playing tennis. You mentioned tennis, and I like playing tennis because it's quite. And I also got a racket. There was a set of courts near us, and used to go with a friend, and we used to, didn't get much in the way of any coaching, but just basically like playing, that sort of thing. So I did all of that, and then through my life, I have, to a broad degree, continued my interest in sport, and I'm interested in it as a viewer and a spectator, but I also do like to play, and not so much now get the chance to play in teams and things, but I do still like to go to the gym and all those sorts of things, and basically I probably don't do enough, but do a little bit anyway. So it is a lifelong gift, isn't it?
It really is. And actually, I think as you go through life, you do maybe change from sport to sport, because obviously as you get older, you have to take into consideration the pressure that then puts onto your body. So, you do find sports that are more suitable as you get a bit older.
I don't know why.
Some people do play.
Surely you're not talking about me here.
No, of course not. Just generally, as people get older.
Yeah.
I'm 44 myself now, so
Good
I do
grief.
feel the pressure that it puts on your body in sport. So yes, there is an element of finding those sports, as you get a little bit older, as to that you can do. And of course, they've made sports a lot more accessible now for people as well. So, you can do walking tennis, you can do walking netball and things like that. So, you can keep doing things well into later life. And that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And people have a lot more knowledge and information of how to maintain their physical health than they might have done, many years ago, because diet and nutrition information is out there if people want to follow it.
Yeah.
But arguably the other problem is, and then we get into the whole diet and nutrition issue, there is so much choice and also so much deprivation that people are faced with not being able to afford the healthy choices and not being able to want to afford them because their lives in other ways are quite dispiriting. So they go for things that, they give them comfort and give them some pleasure and relief from the rest of their lives, as it were. We're just going to take a word from our sponsors, Gemma, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start to look at what, you talked about what we can do in schools and what PE teachers can do specifically, and on a very practical level, what they can do. They can't change the world. They can't revolutionize everything. But what can the PE teachers following this podcast actually do that might make a difference? Okay, back soon.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Okay, welcome back, Gemma. And so what are we to do? What is your common or garden average everyday PE teacher, of which, by the way, all PE teachers, none of you are average or everyday. You're all brilliant. But what are they to do about making PE as attractive as possible?
Well, I mean, we haven't really spoken much about girls
No.
PE so much, and I do feel like this has been a topic of discussion in the PE world, because research shows girls are less likely to participate in PE, and the statistics show that unfortunately girls do enjoy PE a lot less than boys do. And there's lots of reasons around why we think that is happening. I think in the world of girls sport, we've made leaps and bounds around girls sport, because the girls football has increased significantly over the last few years. The Lionesses, the England football team,
absolutely
have made huge leaps and bounds to support and to advocate girls football. And actually there has been a significant rise in the media and of those role models and that sport as well. So that has helped with that aspect of girls PE. But of course, there are still those sort of contentious topics around why girls enjoy PE so much less than boys do. And one of the key things that they talk about is kit. Kit is a big issue for girls, and I think if PE teachers and PE departments can do anything to make sure and have thoughts and talk discussions about how, or if their kit is appropriate and is it comfortable, is it something that they're going to be comfortable in to take part in sport, then that's one of the big issues around girls PE, is making sure they've got something they feel comfortable to perform in. And I think that's linked to periods and things like that, the topics that are uncomfortable to talk about.
But need to be. So in terms of kit then, how would you as a PE teacher go about making the kit more appealing to girls?
Well, I think that the kit's always got to be practical, hasn't it? That's always the key. Every PE department, you've got to have something that's practical for all sports. You can't have things that are, you can't play sport in. But just making sure that, that girls are comfortable, that they are allowed to wear things like leggings or tracksuit bottoms, and they don't have to wear shorts and things like that, because girls are very self-conscious. It's, the statistics show that girls worry about people watching them. They worry about what they look like. They worry about and sweaty and hot. And these are all the things that have come out of the research that worry girls about taking part in PE. So, the kit in particular is, if they don't feel comfortable in what they're wearing, then they're less likely to want to participate. And of course, there has to be a balance, doesn't there? It has to be practical, but that has to be taken into consideration.
Sorry to leap in, Gemma, but would you therefore encourage schools to review their PE kit and involve girls in a consultation on how it should be redesigned?
Absolutely. And we all know that you can't just have a kit based on what people want all the time, because like I said, there has to be a link to that practicality. But I think if you work with the children to talk about what practical looks like alongside what they may feel is comfortable, that would certainly help.
What about the question of affordability with kit? You might get a group of girls that say, oh, we want this, that and the other, and then you cost it out and you find that the kit's actually quite expensive.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've had to do within our PE department, is to make sure that, our PE kit is flexible. So, we do have our school PE kit, but we also allow children to wear a plain T-shirt, for example. We allow the girls to wear leggings or tracksuit bottoms and not just a PE skirt or shorts. So they express some of their concerns or their what they would like, and that's something that we took on board, and we decided that was practical and it still looked smart, and it still was within our sort of school ethos.
Okay, so moving away from kit, in terms of what actually happens in a PE lesson, and in terms of girls, just for a minute, is it that there is too much emphasis on competitive team sports, and that girls, and this is a stereotype which you are welcome to challenge, but quite a few girls are more likely to thrive with more individual physical activity, be it dance, be it, running, but not in a competitive way, gym sport, but not gym sport, but gym activity. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
idea?
I mean, I believe in all those things, but we always find that there's a split, because you will always get the group of girls in PE that love their sport. They want to play netball, they want to play football, they want to be competitive. And then you get some that are not so much. And actually, that isn't just girls, that's with the boys as well. You know, you get the super competitive boys, you get the ones that are not so competitive, and that's fine. And actually, within our curriculum, we have at Key Stage 4 in particular, given those children a bit more choice. So we will have some options that we allow them to kind of choose from. So they can choose from, you know, if they want to be part of those competitive sports, they choose a pathway that they can do those. And then, of course, those that don't will get to do some slightly less competitive options or individual options where they can go to the school gym and use that, or they can do some kind of like fitness to music activities. Or dance activities. So they kind of have a little bit more choice, and actually they're more likely to take part if they've chosen those options than if they're forced, more so at Key Stage 4, to be doing them. So that's always a good way to work with the Key Stage 4 and the older children.
So within what is practical and deliverable, creating choice, and that choice having the competitive team and individual sports alongside more non-competitive individual activity, so that those that prefer that side can at least get some experience of that as well.
Absolutely. And it's always difficult because you've got the curriculum to think about and to make sure that, you know, you're following those guidelines as well, because every school has to do that as well. So it's finding ways around that, but just making it so that they can enjoy it more and they want to participate.
And of course, there is a danger that what you do is just accept that people should not like competitive sport, when actually there are lots of reasons why you should, but it might be that their experience of it has put them off. And if it can be presented in a different way, they can actually really enjoy that competitive sport. So that's the other thing. Don't kind of assume people can't do it and will never want to do it, and so on. Does a PE teacher need to be fully qualified, or do you think that it's fine, as has happened in some schools, let's be honest, instructional coaches are okay?
Well, I think being a qualified teacher is always going to be the best route to take for schools, because those teachers have been off to university and they've learned how to do those, to teach those subjects specifically. So when I was at university, we had to learn how to teach each of those sports. So I hadn't played rugby before I went to university, but when I went to university, they taught us how to play rugby, how to teach rugby, so that we knew how to do the best in those sports and how to deliver those sports to the best of our knowledge, and safely as well, because obviously, you know, some of those sports can be quite dangerous if they're not taught properly. So having that knowledge around that is really, really important, which I don't think you can always get without that qualification. Of course, you learn about the education side of things and the teaching and, you know, how people learn. So I think that's also really important as well.
I think it is very important. I mean, I read somewhere that, I think it was the Youth Sport Trust, that we've lost 7,000 PE teachers since 2012, since that's the legacy of the London Olympics, which surely wasn't the intention. And now, some of those will be replaced by instructional coaches, and I'm sure there are some wonderful people doing that work. But I would passionately argue that schools should very seriously reconsider the approach of replacing fully qualified PE teachers with instructional coaches, because while those people can play a really great part, particularly in extracurricular sports and activities, the core of being a teacher is about really understanding how young people learn and understanding all the issues that go into the experience of being a young person in school, and that holistic role, because most teachers are tutors and might go into pastoral work as well. And if you are not fully qualified and have had that proper training and input and development, all of those things will be largely picked up along the way or not picked up at all. And that simply isn't good enough. So I'm a big advocate of making sure that it's fully qualified PE teachers that we want and need. And I think it will be important to say that. What about this? We're losing the playing fields of the country. That 200 school playing fields have been disposed of since 2010. Apparently 20 schools have no playing field at all. And and facilities, swimming pools. Fewer schools now have swimming pools than was the case 30 or 40 years ago, which seems bonkers. It seems surely that would be an area that we would be, improving in. Facilities should be getting better, not worse. What's your perspective on that and how that's damaged access to PE and sport in schools?
Well, 100%. I think this comes down to finance and funding because, I know from wherever I live, the local swimming pool has disappeared. That closed well over 2 years ago now and has never reopened. And actually, we know of 2 or 3 other local pools that have done the same, unfortunately. And, those pools were used by primary schools to go and teach swimming on a weekly basis. The local swimming clubs were using them. And that's all down to funding. That was all down to, buildings that have not been kept by the people that were in charge of those buildings, and the funding's not been given to them. So they've gone. And that's really sad because those sorts of facilities are so important, especially for young people with swimming. We want young people to be able to swim. It's a life skill. It's a life-saving skill. So at the minute, we've got thousands of children out there that are no longer getting those weekly school lessons, and that's a travesty.
And again, the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged are the young people least likely to be competent swimmers.
Yeah, and they're least likely to be able to go and have those lessons out of school. I know that there are lessons at other local pools where people can travel to go and have those lessons, but unfortunately, not everybody can afford that. Not everybody has the transport for that. It's not accessible. When it was in school and it was a compulsory sport. All those children were having those lessons through their school. It wasn't something that they then had to source outside of school, so it was a massive benefit.
I'm confused, Gemma, because one of the things I've noticed, and I've followed sport throughout my life, is that as a country we're actually more successful in most sports than we were 40 years ago. I'm old enough to remember the grim experience of watching the Olympics in Atlanta in '96 when I think we won 1 gold medal, and now of course we're regularly in the top sort of 2 or 3 or 4, and then even in, dare I say, the football teams we're much more successful nationally. We've had recently a little flurry of really good tennis players. There are a number of sports, and swimming we've talked about, where we've had more success. So this doesn't seem to tally with their argument that sport's in decline. Where am I going wrong?
Well, I think, I don't know, is it the funding around that grassroots level? Is it the funding around those facilities more so? I mean, I know there's a lot more funding put into the higher level sport. So, the top athletes will have lots of funding and sponsorships and things like that. It's the local sort of grassroots level. Are they getting enough funding to keep those facilities going, to keep those clubs going? Because it all costs a lot of money.
And I'm all for the higher level sports getting the really good funding. I think that's been brilliant. I think the logic for me was that they will inspire the next generation if you're successful.
Absolutely.
The trouble is, if the next generation can't then get access because facilities aren't there, or they're unaffordable, or even if they are there, people aren't encouraging them to use them because they're doing other things, then of course it all goes to waste, doesn't
Absolutely.
it?
I'm a massive advocate of role models. I think that's the best thing. That's one of the other things that I was going to suggest to schools is that if you can show as many good sporting role models, male and female, in schools, a lot of children won't see those role models unless they're kind of showed them by schools. And actually that it's a big way of getting children involved. I spoke earlier about the Lionesses and the England football. It's had a huge impact on girls football. They've really increased the number of girls taking part in football. And that's how it's been done. It's amazing.
No, I mean, absolutely. But you won't in and of itself inspire a generation if
there's nothing there to do
there's nothing there to do it with. And so it's got to be both, hasn't it? I mean, football's a bit of an exception because because there's a big sport and there are lots of facilities and it's relatively, anybody can kick a ball about. But I mean, cricket is another sport that I particularly like, and to a large extent, in schools, it's become the preserve of, dare I say it, private and independent schools and not state schools. And there's always been a little bit of that because of the way that the terms work, but because it actually costs quite a bit of money to invest in the right pitches and the right equipment, and all too often state schools have just been starved of that, and it's not been possible for them to offer the opportunities that other schools are able to offer. So there's a lot here that PE teachers can do, and PE departments can do, and schools can do. We haven't even got into the problem of what you take out the curriculum, which is always a thing. You put things in, what do you take out? And that's a difficult one. But nevertheless, what you're saying is, with the time you've got, you make it as engaging as possible. Yep. You remove as many barriers as you can, particularly when we're talking about girls' participation in sport, which we know has been a more difficult. And you give them lots of variety, and you employ proper, fully qualified PE teachers, because they're more likely to do a good job at encouraging young people. I think I want to go back to the start. You've been teaching PE now for 20 years or so. If you were starting out again, would you make the same choice? And have you enjoyed being a PE teacher?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Being a PE teacher is amazing. And I would highly recommend anybody out there that is, passionate about sport, likes working with children, to go into that career, because it has been amazing. And yes, I would absolutely make the same choice. And going forward, I think if you're into sport and you've got that passion, go for it. It's brilliant.
That is a wonderful thing to hear. And I do hope that as many people as listen to this podcast as possible use that and play that to younger people who might be thinking, PE teaching, something I could consider, because we need people like Gemma. We need people who are so enthusiastic about the value of sport and physical activity for our young people, because we know, all the evidence tells us, it changes lives. It makes people happier, healthier, and in so many other ways it benefits society. And therefore it's literally, unarguably, the right thing to do. And it's just a question of how we face the very real pressures and barriers that schools have. And don't blame anybody for the problems that have occurred, but how we face those pressures full on and figure out how we're going to find a way through, because we cannot allow school sport and activity to go into further decline, and we really must reinvigorate it. We owe it to our future generations, and we owe it to our future Gemma Bentleys. Gemma, thank you so much for being such an inspiration and for doing all the wonderful work that you have done with young people over all those years. It's a wonderful thing to do, and it's a wonderful thing to hear that you are so proud and pleased that you've done it. So
thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much for listening today to the podcast Friday Morning Break with me, Carl Smith. I do hope that you tune in to Teachers Talk Radio. There are lots and lots of really interesting podcasts on Teachers Talk Radio. And if you just go to you follow Teachers Talk Radio on social media, whether it be Spotify or Apple Music or lots of other platforms or Podbean, find out, have a look, listen to them in the car, listen to them at home, give your friends and family a chance to listen to, because there are some wonderful programs on this radio station. Thank you for listening, and I hope you don't just jog on. All right. See you later. Bye.